Well, good evening. My name is Ray Hill, and the program is Public Access, Public Affairs. And we try to bring you interesting topics that you're not going to catch on the regular schedule here and there. And we try to go more in depth in those topics than they've got time for on commercial media. And non-commercial media, with all those programming underwritings and things, probably don't devote as much time as they should to the same story. I'm very honored and excited about having as a guest, he's not really a guest to me, he's a friend, Dean Becker. And Dean Becker has been the champion of the cause to end the drug war for a long time. We're going to delve in how did that come about and all of that, and then we're going to talk about it. Because there's some current events that you're reading about in the newspapers and seeing on television of things that are happening right here, even in Texas. And so we'll see how all of that blends together. And welcome to Public Access, Public Affairs, Dean Becker.
Thank you, Ray. I appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, we are friends. You have been my mentor over a decade now, given me the opportunity, the first opportunity, to speak the unvarnished truth about the drug war on KPFT, our
the station wouldn't let you in the door.
Well, they were being kind, but they weren't offering me anything.
And so I walked in and said, well, the prison shall adopt you.
Yeah.
And so we took you on. I made it tough. I did not make it easy for you. I'd give you too little time, too infrequently. But you took that and you built on that.
I did.
And convinced the station that what you had to say was not only valuable enough for them to broadcast, but to be used as the base to distribute that broadcast across the country.
Yes, Ray. And at one point we had right at 100 stations, U.S. and Canada, that carried one or more of my 9 radio productions each week. We're down to about 92, 93 now. But
the word's getting out.
The word's getting out. And I'm glad those other stations aren't carrying my show, because now they're producing their own drug war focused programming. Yes.
So you've also incubated and seen to it that the message gets carried to a broader and broader audience.
Oh, sure. There's a couple of other guys that do internet radio that with iHeartRadio and other outlets that they do, but they started on my show and then went on to produce their own programs as well. So.
Well, I mean, if you want to look around the corner and into the future, that's where a lot of media is going.
Oh, yes.
Internet distribution, because it's so simple and so easy, and unlimited bandwidth is an enormous joy.
Sure.
How did you take up this cause?
Well, I'll be honest. I was a hippie, been a hippie basically my whole adult life.
Well, that kind of shows around the edges, actually. I can see some of that. Yeah.
But it was
shiny white hair. That's not a bad symbol.
Well, I cut off about 2 feet of it, really, as you know. But it was about 97, 98. I was fixing to turn 50 years old, and I think, like a lot of folks, what have I done with my life? What can I do with my life? And it occurred to me that this drug war was not productive. It was not doing anything for society, and I started delving into it and found the old congressional records where the bigotry was presented boldly in Congress, where the lack of scientific knowledge was used as a tool, and where they started this drug war with no real rational reason for it to exist. They just decided that they had a means to subjugate and control certain members of society, mostly black, Hispanic, poor people. And it's been 100 years in its life at this point, but it's still focused on black, Hispanic, and poor people. And it still hasn't done any good.
Well, you found that.
Yes, sir.
That very same information that you just described is now out there.
It is. It's becoming more
Other people are carrying that message. You get a documentary on one of the documentary History Channel, somebody that they begin with the information that you just gave us. Yep. And they bring in the racial influence, the Chinese influence in the opium trade. They bring in all of that. They didn't do that 5, 6, 7 years ago.
No, no. I like to think I was a spark, I don't know, that helped create the awareness of this. I've been after our local media, the press, the broadcasters, to bring focus to bear on this. I was real proud. What was it? May 5th.
Yeah.
Medical marijuana editorial in the Houston Chronicle.
That was an amazing editorial.
It was, and I hoped it would influence our legislators.
By the way, it's still on their website.
It is. It is.
If you want to go to cron.com, and it's there.
It's just, the title of the editorial is Medical Marijuana, and they just went right into it, how it's not a danger, it's not a threat. We have so many people overdosing on these prescription pills and all the pharmaceuticals they're handing out, and that they were focused on the fact that through the use of medical marijuana, they can cut down on those pharmaceuticals. They can perhaps eliminate those pharmaceuticals and have a decent life. And it's an idea whose time has come. I think it's escalating on a pretty sharp incline there.
Yeah, well, there is a theory in activism that nothing really happens until the last minute, because things need momentum.
Yeah.
And the snowball starts rolling, and it's bigger and bigger and more significant. At what point did you realize there was a snowball at all?
Oh, there were some lean years in the beginning. You know, when I first started working with you on the prison show, and I want to mention something. When I was on the prison show, it did create a spark within KPFT. The Queer Show invited me to do a segment on there. Reach Out in the Darkness, the Labor Show. And then, of course, Rourke asked me to start doing the 420 Drug War News.
Absolutely.
And I guess it's, what I'm focused on here is that people know this needs changing. They've just been afraid to say as much or to say it publicly or...
This very afternoon before I got here,
Yes, sir.
I stopped by a convenience store to cash a check, a little check cashing office in the back of it, and young man said, what's going on? I said, well, I'm going to go do a radio show. Who are you going to do radio? I said, I'm going to do a radio show with Dean Becker. He recognized your name. And then he started saying that legalization would create more problems than it would solve. Mm. Well, I'm looking at a guy that I happen to know is in a recovery program from his alcohol addiction. Mm. And there's probably other elements there. What message do you have for folks like him who instinctively go into saying what problems
it's going to create?
They're going to create. Yeah. Hey, you're the guy that carries the message.
Right. Well, first off, I would like to tell him that just last Friday, the 8th, May 8th, made 30 years for me without a drink of alcohol. Okay. My drug of destruction, if you will. Every day, I drive by a dozen, 100 stores selling that, you know, cheap and easy.
Yeah.
And yet I maintain my composure. I don't want to buy it anymore. I don't want the effects it can give me. And the same holds true. There are people out there who have a drug of destruction that's cocaine or heroin or, you know, any
prescription drugs. The list goes on and on and on.
Sure. And they, if they are to acquire their drug, they have to go to the black market. They have to pay highly inflated prices. They don't really know what they're buying, whether it's cocaine or a mixture of rat poison and baby powder. And I guess the point I would like to present to the gentleman who objected, that you were talking to, is that the main reason I object to the drug war, it has never worked, first off. It has never stopped even one determined child from getting their hands on drugs, so it's a preposterous notion from the get-go. But secondarily, what it does, it empowers terrorists, if they're just brave enough to grow these opium flowers we forbid.
Yeah.
It enriches these barbarous cartels in Mexico, killing tens of thousands of people every year. And it has given reason for more than 30,000 gangs here in these United States that prowl our neighborhoods with high-powered weapons, selling our children these drugs and inviting them to lives of crime and addiction. And again, we've never stopped one determined child. So I would ask him to come on my show. But it's hard to get anybody to come on my show to defend this policy.
Well, I don't think that this guy has even thought through what he's saying.
Yes.
It's just a knee-jerk reaction.
Sure.
And that is a product of, you would say, propaganda.
Well, of course. It's been 100 years.
He's been fed that and fed that and fed that. And even though his experience might have been to help him in such a way that he could see it better, he ain't bought it yet.
Right.
That propaganda is powerful. How do you balance something like that?
Oh, it's a tough chore, Ray. It really is, because there is that, I call it a quasi-religion of believing in drug war. It's what my daddy and his granddaddy taught him, and it's what we're supposed to think, and we don't want to remove the blinders. And
Well, and the state spent a good bit of money and resources to teach you
yes. Oh, yeah.
that this was the thing to do. I mean, reefer madness, we laugh about it, but that was taken as real.
Yeah. Oh, and
Reefer madness was at least as real as Birth of a Nation, in a very powerful medium.
And it got in the heart and soul of too many people, this belief that reefers will, addict your children, you'll become an axe murderer, or, leads to insanity, criminality, and death. And those thoughts have been negated over the years, over the decades, but there are still those people in positions of power who still believe these thoughts, who have refused to look at the obvious glaring evidence around them and just cling to this reefer madness. That's what happened in Texas this year. Our legislators, just 11 bills were presented dealing with marijuana and hemp. There were scores of people went before the legislature, waited until 1, 2, and 3 in the morning to present their thoughts to these legislators. There were legislators crying, believing, knowing this was a necessary change, and yet it sat in the calendars committee, and it just was never released, never given a chance.
One member of the House and one senator can do that.
That's what happened.
Let me talk to these people. If you're waiting for me to do the gotcha question, that ain't coming. That ain't the kind of host I am. Dean Becker's a friend of mine. He's going to be treated as a guest by me. But if you've got that gotcha question, if you really believe that the elimination of the war on drugs is more dangerous than it is positive, that telephone's sitting right there. That number, 713, see it? 807-1794, right there in your face. Give us a call. You get a crack at Dean.
Please do.
Now, if he wants that. He's been begging for folks like that on his show for as long as I've known him. I've never seen him do a radio show at KPFT or anywhere else that he didn't say, we got a chair here. If you're an advocate for the drug war, come on down, let's have a discussion.
Absolutely right, Ray. Starting from the drug czar on down, I have, for over a decade, tried to invite them. Every 3 months, I call the drug czar's office. Every 3 months, I call the head of the DEA's office and invite them, not expecting them to come on the show, but so I can say, I have done this, I have tried.
Well, you've had police chiefs and sheriffs and other people, and I notice they kind of pull the punch when they're on your show.
Well, look, when we're out in the coffee room talking before the show, it's much more wide open. They'll talk about legalization and the failure of the drug war and so forth. But when we get in the studio and that mic's turned on, it all shuts down quite a bit. But let's send some kudos to our police chief, Charles A. McClellan Jr., who it was December 5th, came on my show and declared the drug war to be a miserable failure.
Well, I know Charles McClellan. I meet with him on a regular basis.
Sure.
His door's open for members of various community, representatives from various community. As a matter of fact, I just scheduled one on my calendar for next month. You know what he anguishes about?
What's that?
Baltimore.
Yeah.
Ferguson. That's what's driving his train right now.
Sure.
He wants to make damn sure, because any one of 100 cops can get his ass in trouble in a flash.
Sure.
Matter of seconds.
Yeah.
And he wants to make sure that does not become a larger problem than it needs to become. You got to admire a guy that's going out of his way to prevent that.
Well, look, there was following Ferguson, there was a major rally surrounding police headquarters here in Houston. With signs, who do you call when police murder, things like this.
I know, I was part of it. You were there.
Yes, and loud and rambunctious, and nothing happened except protecting those people from traffic.
Right.
And that shows.
And protecting traffic from those people. I think we've got a call. You ready?
I am.
Okay, put them on there. Hello, you're on Public Affairs, Public Access.
Great topic. Opioid patients were shut down 2 years ago by the president making Vicodin Schedule 2. In the last year or so, you had these Obama pain clinics pop open, but they don't care about your x-rays. They don't care about your blood work. They do care about the purity of essence of your urinalysis. You will be denied care if you're not straight that way. How are they getting away with this? And also, why is there in the last 2 years, a DPS number on these prescriptions? Call the DPS. They don't know why there's a DPS number on the prescriptions. I had doctors speak about this. These guys are Nazis. They'll come in posing as patients.
Well, let me explore some of the things you brought up with Dean. I appreciate you calling in.
Thank you.
Dean, do you know what he's talking about?
I kind of understand his agitation. Let me
No,
just say
his agitation. You don't have to explain that. We could all hear that.
Yeah.
It went through those telephone lines and through these television lines pretty easily.
Yeah.
So we know that he's upset, but DPS, Texas Department of Public Safety.
I'm sorry, I do not know any specifics there. I don't want to lie to you. I would imagine it's maybe a federal government mandate that it needs to be.
No,
on there,
DPS would not be a federal mandate. DPS would be a state mandate.
Yeah.
Yeah, because DPS is a state agency. For them to get involved in prescription drugs.
Just shows this fear that people have about drugs, where they are, who gets them, where they might go. You know, the truth be told, I think it was 1902,
Yeah.
Bayer invented aspirin.
Yeah.
1904, I believe it was, they invented heroin. Bayer aspirin, Bayer heroin used to sell on the grocer's shelf at the very same
Side by
price.
side.
Side by side. Aspirin was for a headache. Bayer heroin was for when you hit your thumb with a hammer. You know, it's a whole different attitude. But what it was a known quality and quantity that people could take without fear of overdosing. As I mentioned earlier, we don't know if the heroin's got rat powder, baby powder.
Up until my childhood, mothers with a colic child could walk into a drugstore and buy an opioid.
Yes. I can't remember the name of it.
I can't remember the name of it, but there was an opioid that was available.
Yeah, in a liquid form.
It was in a liquid form, and a lot of mothers got addicted to it. They would go buy it for their colic child who hadn't coughed and puked in a while to keep their habit fed.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and to come back to his thought, I mean, there are too many monitors, too many controls involved in these drugs. My theory, legalize all drugs. That includes heroin, cocaine, etc. Let it be made by Merck and Pfizer. Sell it at the drugstore for a penny on the black market dollar to adults. And then we judge adults by their actions. And if one of them should happen to sell it to a child, I would be for sending them to prison. But the point I guess I'm getting at is that it's all just it's a fairy tale.
Well,
it has no nexus with reality.
Let's apply a little rubber to the road here. All right, you have over 100 police agencies in Houston, Texas.
Right.
I mean, school districts got police, junior college got police, senior college got police. There are constable districts all over the place.
Yep.
And each one of those are administered. Metro's got police.
Sure.
There's
got police.
There's hundreds of police agents in Houston. Drugs, the finding and arresting people and charging them with drugs is a major activity of all of those police agencies.
Sure. A large component.
It's a large component of what they spend their day doing.
Yep.
Why in the world is this such an important element of that whole? I mean, you're a representative.
Sure.
For a police agency opposed or against Prohibition. I mean, that's a group of professionals in that field.
Sure. Let me first off just address law enforcement against prohibition. We're now a group of, I think, 160,000 members and supporters. The members were current or former cops, prosecutors, judges, wardens.
People in the trade.
People in the trade. And we've been in existence now about 12 years. What we have done is open that dialogue. There's been marijuana-centric people. There's been people talking about needle exchange, but there's never been an organization that said, let's legalize them all, and here's why. And I forgot your question. Yeah.
Well, the question was about law enforcement. And so you're giving me some idea that there is light somewhere in the tunnel.
Yes, yes.
And that is people from law enforcement, from prosecutorial wing of the executive branch of government.
Right.
That say, wait a minute, stop.
Yeah.
You know, let's rethink this. Let's look at this in a rational way. I've heard them on your show programming
Sure.
many times, and they come in, they make rational sense, they're reasonable people. If they're in the job, they're obliged to do what their job description tells them to do.
Right, right.
But there is an enormous factor here about money for agencies.
Sure. Getting to be more so. Yeah.
That confiscation, forfeiture of property involved could include a car or a truck or cash money or I mean, there's that classic story of the old farmer that was going to buy a new tractor and he had $30,000 in his pocket, headed to Massey Ferguson, and he got stopped in the airport, and that was an assumption that was drug money. They took the man's money.
Sure. Happens every day. Happens many times every day. And, you know, all they have to do is get a dog, and he alerts by sitting down, of course.
Yeah.
And they smell the money, and the dog smells cocaine.
Well, they told me there's no such thing as a $20 bill that wasn't infected.
Well, sure, once it goes through the bank, it gets shuffled with all the other money. It's all got cocaine on it. But it's just another sick means to take people's money. And don't forget, Ray, if they think you have drugs, they can take your children. They can keep your house.
And you may not be able to get food stamps when you get out of prison.
Sure, and get an education, credit, housing, all these things. Can't vote.
I mean, in Texas, if you get through doing your time, you can vote. They call that the Ray Hill bill. Trust me, I know about that. I have to argue about it 40 times a day.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, this is not really a laughing matter.
No.
This is a very serious matter, and we put a lot of resources into this. And wherever you have got money, you're going to have leaks.
Oh, yeah.
And that corrodes the ethics
Sure.
of law enforcement people as well as anybody else. We read about it in the newspaper every day.
Law enforcement, border patrols, prison guards. The list is, not exactly endless, but it's a lot of people that are corrupted because of these dollars, the black market dollars. I mean, we talk about ending prohibition. What I really want to do is end the black market. That's the real problem. That's funding terrorists.
And the prohibition is feeding
Yeah.
the necessity for there being a black market.
A lot of people like to say, oh, well, why didn't we learn from alcohol prohibition? But when you get right down to it, alcohol prohibition wasn't prohibition really, it was decrim. And that's what they were trying to possibly do here in Texas. But decrim still leaves the bad actors in charge of production and distribution. Under alcohol prohibition, you could have alcohol in your house. Nobody was going to kick in your door because you had a bottle of booze. But it's just a pretend game.
Dean, this business of the violence in Mexico is a very serious business.
Oh, yes.
And I mention Mexico simply because it's the one closest to us, but it's going on literally all over the world to a different degree. And
Sure.
it always that is not really about drugs. That is about the war on drugs, isn't it?
Well, sure. It's not.
Break that down for us.
It's not like they're because they're selling drugs that it makes them. How to say it? The prohibition of the drugs gives them so much value, is what it is. I mean, in Mexico right now, you can buy a pound of marijuana for $10. It is the transportation, bringing it across the border, you know, going up against law enforcement and taking the chance.
Just classic capitalism trade routes.
Yeah, that gives it a chance. And by the time it gets up here, they say it's $1,000 or whatever. But it's just a case of the prohibition creating the problem. The prohibition empowers the cartels and the gangs. Without the prohibition, they're not going to be trying to sell weed at the high school because it will have so little value that it would, you know, it will still go on to a small degree.
Oh, absolutely.
Just like we still got moonshiners selling booze in certain parts of the country, but it's not the problem.
Some of my relatives, actually.
Well, but what we've done is just,
But they also work for the prison system. So if the moonshine business runs today, they got the prison guard job going for them. Yeah.
Well, that almost goes hand in hand, doesn't it? I don't know.
Give us a call. There's only one society in prison.
Right.
Convicts, guards, same society, the same culture. they do the same things. They have the same weaknesses. And as a matter of fact, first cousin of mine, Billy Max Moore, was killed by inmate Eroy Brown. Read the book, The Trials of Eroy Brown. Billy Max was killed by Eroy. Well, family reunion 6 months before he got killed. He said, "Butch Wayne, that's my family name. Don't you ever call me that. Butch Wayne, you was lucky when you went to prison, did your time, got out." He said, "I can't get out of that sucker. My wife wants to live at the rate that they pay majors in Texas prison system, and I can't get out of it."
Yeah.
Same people, same society, same problem, same initiative. The drug testers for the guards are real careful not to be very effective. Drug testers for the inmates are much more effective.
Right. Yeah, but right. They have a hard time, I guess, recruiting or keeping prison guards, so they're not going to mess with them too much, right?
No, if you get caught trafficking or using drugs, anything, you're going to get transferred to another unit till the heat blows over, then they can move you around where they want to. I hope you would give us a call because Dean wants to take another question. I appreciate that. Let me tell you, I appreciate the guy that called in earlier. We heard his stress, we heard his strain. He's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
He is a victim of the crime war, the war on drugs. We got another caller. Let's put him on.
Good.
You're on the air. Hello?
Hello.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Am
I there?
Yes,
you're on the air, please.
Sorry, I didn't recognize your voice. Let me start off right off. Marijuana will keep you out of a wheelchair. Also, when you think about this issue of the DEA and the cartel in Colombia celebrating birthday parties together, providing hookers for each other, and that's no big deal. They're the two most interested parties in the drug war status quo. But they have a freaking congressional hearing on this a week later. I mean,
well, I think that what the legislature was complaining about is that they didn't get an invitation.
Right.
And apparently it was a pretty well-funded, good party.
I'm sure they play softball on the weekends together. What is the big deal, you know? They are the most interested parties in the status quo of the drug war. So why shouldn't they party together a little bit and keep up communication between themselves?
Well, Dean, we're talking to the choir here.
Yeah.
All of our choir are on their side.
Yeah.
Of this. And let me tell you, let me put myself in this picture. I'm Ray Hill. I gave up drinking when I was 18 years old. I've got a 56-year sobriety chip in my pocket. I have not used any drugs or alcohol for 56 years. I don't even take stuff for pain. I deal with pain with Zen. Now, I did find out whenever I had acute appendicitis that pain couldn't be managed with Zen.
Yeah.
But I am a teetotaler. I am absolutely 100% committed to helping Dean in the war on drugs. That is a political decision that I have made. I think it's well-based because I've been listening to him all these years, And whenever I see a headline like the cartel directors throw a party for the DEA agents, that is not a surprise to me.
Hey, I appreciate the call. Ray, I want to share with you something. This
Sure.
is from The Hill, the Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
newspaper. Help
Well, the Hill, that's a fun paper.
Help wanted. DEA seeks new leader. Drug Enforcement Administration is seeking a new chief to prolong the failed war on drugs. The ideal candidate should have at least 10 years experience turning a blind eye to scandal and corruption, be adept at undermining the Bill of Rights, and have a firm and unwavering commitment to the status quo. You must also be a self-starter, as this position comes with little congressional oversight. Now, this goes on and on. This is a facetious ad.
But the trouble with that kind of humor is that it is based on reality, or it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
And you're right. There is little congressional oversight. You go over there and do your pirate stuff.
Yeah.
And that's a good way to describe the DEA and its operation. It's pirate stuff.
Yep.
They're stopping trucks on the highway, taking what's in them, charging poor mules, and giving them bukus of time because of mandatory minimum sentences.
Sure. And the wonderful thing is, even the Republicans are now starting to address the over-incarceration, the mandatory minimums, the laws from the 1980s, the Reagan.
3 strikes you're out.
Yeah, and they're starting to realize the.
Well, at $34,000 a head for every convict in general population.
Yeah.
Hell, you could bribe them, give them $17,000, they behave, and we'll keep on sending your checks.
Yeah. It would make more sense, but get a politician to agree to that, I don't know. This brings to mind, we have a new, forgot his name, but a new DEA head has been appointed. I talked to a couple of reformers today. Nobody knows too much about him, which way he's going to lean. But the good thing is he isn't a staunch prohibitionist. That much we do know. And we're hoping that some of these...
Well, I mean, it depends on his role in writing his job description.
Yeah.
People a long time ago asked me, how can you deal with these wardens and these directors of prisons? I expect them to follow their job description.
Sure.
And as long as they're following their job description, we can talk about that, but they don't set their job description.
Yeah.
And so if somebody's following their job description, you expect that. What you need is somebody who gets the job and questions their job description. And say, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I would like to have some input to say how far I push this madness.
Something that, we started off talking about marijuana, and I want to kind of come back to an aspect of it. We were hoping to get the laws changed in the legislature this session. Not going to happen this year.
Not going to happen. What did happen?
Well,
Started out with a good start.
yeah. But it did create a spark. There was one bill made it out of the Senate that was dealing with, I think, the CBD oils, the non-high component. But the House didn't address
Didn't pick up on it.
Didn't pick up on it. But
Now, there are 2 states with varying degrees. I mean, there's a difference between the laws in Colorado and the laws in, is it
Washington.
Washington
Well,
state?
there's 2 more now, too.
Okay.
Alaska and Oregon,
Okay.
as well as Washington, D.C. Washington,
D.C. has city ordinance that prevents arrest. It's basically a decrim law.
Well, it's underannounced. You can have in public now.
Okay.
They I don't know how to say it. They can't use the smell of marijuana as a rationale for doing a search there.
Yeah, we had a big deal right here in Harris County about trace evidence. Mm-hmm. Remember that?
Oh yeah, microscopic amounts in the corners of bags. Yeah, and that again, let me think. My first interview with the district attorney here in Houston was Chuck Rosenthal.
Okay.
And he told me, well, he doesn't understand the drug war. Basically, that was right before he quit because of his own drug addiction.
Yeah.
I interviewed Lycos, and I even had a debate between Lycos and Bradford when they were both running for DA.
Yeah.
But this new one, Anderson, she will not come on my show.
Devon.
Devon.
Well, I knew Mike very well, and I had conflict of schedules on a couple occasions when I could have met Devon Anderson. But when I meet with her, I bring up Dean Becker and
tell her,
sit down with you and talk to you because Mike Anderson and I worked together on the Paul Broussard case.
Right. Yeah.
He was the prosecutor in that case. And then he became judge, and we got along anguishing about some of the nuances of that case. And toward the end of that, toward the end of his life, he appears in a documentary about me now.
Yeah.
And we're on the same side of the fence, pulling on the same end of the rope.
Yeah.
Politicians will come around, but first you've got to get them to hear you out.
Right.
Because you've got logic and sanity on your side.
Sure. To me, Ray, it boils down to a simple question. What is the benefit? We're empowering terrorist cartels and gangs, never stopped one child. We've squandered $1 trillion. We've given well over $10 trillion to these same criminal elements. What do we get back? What is the benefit? It's a hope, it's a dream with no results. And to get people to just realize that it's just a hope. It's that we'll stop that kid from getting drugs, that we'll get all the drugs supplies. It's never going to happen. You cannot overcome the law of supply and demand, but it's the hope and the dream of generations of politicians for some reason.
Well, as long as they can keep the myth running, they can ride the myth.
Yeah.
And what you're doing is just like turning on the lights and watching the roaches scatter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I got a chance. What was it? I don't know. Right before the election, when Mr. Anderson got elected, was it Mike?
Mike Anderson.
But just before Mike got elected, there was a conference out at U of H, and I was the MC, and we were asking questions of, you know, participants.
Candidates, yeah.
And Mike got done, and I ran out of questions for him, so I asked mine. I said, Mike, I used my same thing. The drug war empowers terrorist cartels and gangs. It's never stopped at any child. What is the benefit, sir? And he started getting red in the face. He says, you're trying to tell me that all these police officers that gave their time and their lives, it was for nothing? And about that time, the deputy police chief walked up and said, Mike, let me handle this for you. So that was my only discussion.
It was the only crack.
Yeah, with Mike Anderson.
No, Mike was a true and blue prosecutor. There's no question about it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you, one-to-one, start dealing with this is a fact, that is a fact, this is a fact, this is obvious fact.
Right.
A producer sent me a quick note saying, it is obvious that the cartels are calling the shots in some Mexican government agencies.
Sure. Oh, it's pretty widespread.
How likely is that to happen on this side of the border?
I think, Ray, in some ways it is, because we have renegade law enforcement in some little towns down around the border and in various cities around the country. Chicago, in essence, being one of those, where the government has allowed the Sinaloa cartel to basically take over the drug trade and to run the drug trade without much interference from law enforcement, because they've learned to do pager and phone deliveries of these drugs, where somebody wants a couple of bags of heroin, they dial a number and they page somebody out in the field. They meet at a given site, a corner or something, and they sell the drugs that way without having to have a home full of drugs that can get busted and give people multiple years behind bars. It is a...
Well, let me throw out a very strange idea.
Okay.
The Iran-Contra business. The importation and sale of drugs was used to finance the arming.
Sure. Of the Nicaraguan...
Yeah. You got money from there, and somehow Iran hostages and got all involved in all of that.
And I've heard it was part of the crack cocaine thing in California. And
so the United States government and its dealing in black money, the black market money,
Reagan
has used that as a government policy issue.
Well, it has a little nexus with that situation in Colombia with cartels and the DEA agents. You know, there is this nexus between the two sides. They're not as adversarial as we might think.
We got another call. Let's try this one.
Yes, sir.
Maybe this is someone that can take you on. Caller, you're on the air.
What you mentioned about would their power become north of the border? I remember the cartel fields in California. They had an agent that fell out of a helicopter. Thus, Appropriation Chairman Rogers of Kentucky defunded their fleet to do these operations in California of cartel fields. So that's like protection. What do you think?
Well, protection wasn't the issue I was fishing about. Protection is the issue of the overall policy. Policy is established in various areas of government. And what if the reason we can't make any progress here into reforms in Texas is because elected public officials are being paid to stop there from being policy changes? Now that's direct action into policy making. I know how to make policy. I mean, I've been a lobbyist most of my life. I go talk to the legislatures about any number of things, and once in a while you hit a brick wall. Well, when you hit a brick wall, it usually has to do with somebody else's money has built that wall. And how do we know that the cartel interests are not preventing Texas change in policy?
At the current time, there's no way to tell for sure. There are maybe indications, but it's all nebulous and you can't really point fingers. But
yeah, but if you were going to do that yourself, you would do it that way.
Sure.
It would be smoke and mirrors, and you can.
It all reminds me of, and I'm trying to draw his name, I can't remember, but a former head of the CIA back about 1989 made a statement, something to the effect that it's possible that the cartels are controlling every aspect of the drug war. And William Colby was his name. And he was found dead. He was found dead of a canoeing accident about a week later. And I can't say there's any nexus there, but it's the kind of thing that makes you wonder. And maybe it influences other people and keeps them from saying what they know to be true. Because there's a lot, look, $385 billion a year. That's what this drug war, what the criminals and the cartels make. More than $1 billion a day. And that can certainly buy some influence, I would think. I think mostly it's ignorance, and no, previously it was ignorance. Now it's just fear. Fear of saying what they know to be true, whether it's in the Texas House or the U.S. House. They know the truth about this drug war. They just don't know how to walk away from this scenario without.
We're talking about not only a political change, we're talking about a cultural change.
Yeah.
We're going to have to attack this thing. If we're going to have real reform, we have to attack this thing at the root of where the mythology comes from.
Right.
And that is an enormous job.
Well, sure.
How do you do that? You do that with media.
Media is working on it. I mean, again, we talked about the Chronicle editorial. Here's one from the Dallas Morning News, which was very much in support of legalizing marijuana. It talks about Representative David Simpson. His statement was, I am proposing this plant be regulated like tomatoes, jalapenos, or coffee. Let it be allowed for good, helping people with seizures, treating warriors with PTSD, so on. This was given respect. And
in the Dallas Morning News.
In the Dallas Morning News.
Which is probably a more conservative newspaper than the Houston Chronicle.
And it just brings to mind that these politicians, I use the phrase on my show, these politicians have made their bones through this policy in believing that it's necessary. And it's real hard for them to now back down and allow those bones to be uncovered again. Many of them, those in the top positions more especially, have made their bones through belief in this policy.
Well, now, there is differences between the availability of marijuana in the states where it has been legalized or decriminalized, or however how you want to put that. Mm-hmm. Alaska laws are different from Washington laws, which are different from Colorado's laws, mm-hmm. which are different from Oregon's laws. and D.C. is maybe the most progressive of the bunch.
It is.
So how do we get a pattern of laws that become more or less uniform, that would address the problem beyond those states?
Well, many people are saying it needs to come from, the U.S. House and the Senate. It needs to be given a new definition, a new perspective. And that may well be true, but it's going to be like across America. There's different alcohol laws in
Sure.
Alabama and Texas
Oh,
and
yeah.
everywhere else. And
I remember when Mississippi still was a prohibitionist state.
yeah, and what day?
Highest paid public official in Mississippi was the collector of taxes on illegal liquor.
And he probably got
Because he
lot
got
on
a
his side.
commission on what he brought in.
But I don't know that there will be a all-encompassing redefining of all this. I think it's going to be gradual, at least for the next 5 years or so. I think once the stigma wears off, once the paranoia and the delusions disappear.
Yeah, you're talking about attacking the mythology at its root.
Once it's shown, and again, Colorado and Washington are beginning to show that, well, children are not having more access, or at least they're not trying to get more access. They're actually finding car wrecks are going down. The overdose deaths from prescription drugs are going down. So they're seeing benefit already in a little over a year. And it's just going to take redefining or eliminating the old hysteria and propaganda, because as we talked about earlier, it was very powerful.
It was very powerful, and it was brought to us by the government,
Yep.
who had very specific objectives in mind. There was the people that drafted the policy,
Right.
had specific objectives in mind. They did not intend for Reaper Madness to be a laughing replay on late night television.
Well, but it certainly is now.
It is now.
It's hilarious.
But you see that the more extreme they become, they've got to polish that, because you can't sell that. Reaper Madness is a joke now.
Sure.
And so you've got to really,
Well,
if things get better in Washington State,
right.
and things get better in Oregon and Alaska and Colorado and Washington, D.C., it will have an effect. Now, you're going to have to come up with a plan. And I've got a hint. The American Law Institute are the people that wrote the Model Penal Code way back in the 60s.
Right.
And in 10 years, every state in the United States adopted that code. 10 years.
Right.
Record time.
Yeah.
They are now working on rewriting the sentencing laws.
Well, good.
Sentencing laws, because 3 strikes you're out anywhere is crazy.
Sure.
Mandatory minimums is crazy. Enhancing everything with everything is crazy. If you send somebody to prison for stealing a car and they get out and steal another car, apparently prison didn't work.
Right.
So sending them for more time in prison is only going to probably teach them how to steal better cars.
Sure. Or,
And so prisons become universities for crime.
yeah.
And so if prisons don't work and are too expensive for us to afford, we have to rethink that paradigm. If the continuation of the war on drugs doesn't work, and you have been very clear in your message that it does not work, then we need to do more efficient use of the resources at our disposal.
I think that's slowly, very slowly falling in place. It is happening. My thought, my hope.
You're still an optimist.
I am, but I'm also, everyone I meet, if they don't believe, if they're not with me at the moment we meet already,
You'll move them.
they will be, because I beg anybody. As I said, I contacted drug czar and the head of the DEA. I've contacted the sheriff. I've contacted Devon Anderson already twice this year. They won't.
You got a
come
new
up.
sheriff now.
Well, true, yeah.
Hickman.
Maybe I should give him a few weeks, but
Yeah.
the point being,
Well, he has been a constable, so he's a cop. You can communicate with him, cop, and it's a culture. You talk to him like you talk to cops.
sure.
Yeah.
But I guess the point I was getting to is that there's really nobody anywhere who can defend this. They can get behind their bully pulpit and bluster with the
Preach
major
at you.
media, preach at you, but not allow me a question. And again, it's as simple as, what is the benefit? You know, I mean, there's more that needs to precede that, but the question becomes that, and there is no benefit. We've proven that. It is.
But you have to keep on proving it and keep on proving it.
Yeah, yeah. I think of when, you know, I went to Oakland a couple of months ago. It was a major, what was it called, International Cannabis Business Conference. There were judges, sitting judges. Yep. There were 2 U.S. Representatives at the pre-meeting, before the thing even began. At the meeting, there were, you know, dozens of people from around the country, around the world, smoking weed openly in a hotel room. And these are judges. These are U.S. representatives. But it was a private event. I won't name any names.
No.
But the point of it is that these people see the truth, believe and live that truth, that marijuana is to them.
Well, of course, hypocrisy is not a rare animal in American politics.
Right.
It's been going on for a few years now. That there is. And the other thing about politics people don't realize is they're never talking about what they're talking about.
Right.
Yeah, there's always a second agenda, the third agenda on the picture. Dean, I do not envy your quests.
Well,
but
I'm a little younger than you. I might live to see it come to fruition.
I admire them. No, the Gates thing is over.
Yeah. Yeah.
On on June the 25th, marriage equality will be the law of the land. And it's over with.
Look, there are still those people. I heard there's somebody in the Texas House of Representatives trying to build a law that will circumvent that rule.
Except, the Texas legislature can do a lot of things. It does not trump the Supreme Court of the United States.
Very true.
Ask Arkansas about that.
Yeah.
After a board of Brown versus Board of Education.
Yeah.
And the marriage equality thing, don't believe what you're reading in other sources. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is driving this train.
Well, she is. I've heard
she is clearly driving this
got
train.
The engineer hat on. She's doing
absolutely, and she's doing it. This is her career cap piece.
Yeah.
I hope the day comes when someone on the Supreme Court says the confusion is madness. And each state having their own approach to decriminalization requires that we step in and say this is going to be the rules.
Yeah.
If it doesn't happen in the legislature because nobody's got enough balls to do it, if it happens in the Supreme Court where they make balls, it's going to happen sooner or later, and you're going to live to see that day.
Well, I think so. I think in 2 years, actually, we will make some progress.
Now, the other thing I need to caution you about, when the battles are all over, when the goalposts have all been reached, when everything that you set out to do has been accomplished, they're going to forget who the hell you are.
Well,
so if you're waiting for gratitude and attention, surrender, Dorothy, that ain't coming.
I hear you. When the police chief came on my show and, declared the drug war to be a miserable failure, that night, I think it was NBC carried a 5-minute segment on the 6 p.m. news. Sunday morning, the Fox had a 9-minute panel.
Yep.
They all are saying the chief's right, it's a miserable failure. And then the following week, the Chronicle had 2 stories and that editorial. Wise counsel is what it was, quoting the chief. In none of them did they use my name.
And you say, well, if you're looking for that sort of thing, whenever you get really old like me, they start calling you a living legend, which is basically get the hell out of the way and let the younger people do it. Dean, I appreciate your friendship.
Oh, Ray, it's been an honor to be your friend. I tell people about it. I still wear my prison show keychain.
Keychain, right
everywhere I
there
go.
it is, right
there.
there.
It is,
Yeah,
because
okay.
I was proud to start with you, and I'm proud to be your friend.
And I have one to match.
Well, it's a pretty cool thing, if you ask me. There we go.
There we go.
We got him.
We got our prison show keychain. It was made by John Weiss,
Yeah,
who I'm still trying to get out of prison.
yeah. I got this friend. He got busted 3 times.
Yeah.
DEA bought some weed, sold him some weed, bought
Yep.
some weed, sold him some weed. The 3rd time they sold him like 400 pounds, busted him right then.
Yeah.
He's been in prison 32 years for marijuana.
Federal?
Federal. Well, I don't know if it was federal.
If it's based on weight and it's federal, there's going to be, they let 14 people out already
Yeah.
to test the waters, but there's 17,000
Sure.
former federal convictions based on weight
This
that'll get time reductions.
this guy, you know, he's the one that trains the youngsters
Yeah.
how to behave, because they're fixing to get released. He teaches them. He has nothing but high marks from all the guards and the warden even, and yet somehow the prison board won't let him out.
I'm going to talk to these folks for a minute.
All right.
You're watching this on Channel 17. That is Houston Media Sources Access Channel. Or you may be watching it on Uverse, one of the choices at 99, whatever how you're watching this. All of this is being done in the name of Houston Media Source. We are Access Channel people. We work very hard to bring you information that you literally cannot get elsewhere. I want to thank Dean Becker for being my guest tonight. He brought us information that good, and I didn't have to pull it out of him. I guided him a little bit, but he can take it on his own. Support this idea. Listen to the other programs on HMS Channel 17. Listen to hmsnetradio.org. It's an internet radio station. I'm on there every Wednesday afternoon from 2 until 3 o'clock. Use our service. We exist for you. My name is Ray Hill. Thank you for watching Public Access, Public Affairs. Good night.
Thank you.